The South Sudan People's Defence Forces, SSPDF, formerly the Sudan People's Liberation Army, SPLA, is the military force of the Republic of South Sudan. The SPLA was founded as a guerrilla movement against the government of Sudan in 1983 and was a key participant of the Second Sudanese Civil War and the subsequent independence of South Sudan. It was led by John Garang, who died in 2005 and was succeeded by Salva Kiir. As of 2010, the SPLA was divided into divisions of 10,000 to 14,000 soldiers. Following the Comprehensive Peace Agreement in 2005, the last remaining large and well-equipped militia, the South Sudan Defence Forces, SSDF, under General Paulino Matiep, signed an agreement with Kiir known as the Juba Declaration, which amalgamated the two forces under the SPLA banner. Following South Sudan's independence in 2011, Kiir became president and the SPLA became the new republic's regular army. In May 2017 there was a restructure and the SPLA took on the name of South Sudan Defence Forces, SSDF, with another change in September 2018 to South Sudan People's Defence Forces. As of 2018, the army was estimated to have 185,000 soldiers as well as an unknown number of personnel in the small South Sudan Air Force. As of 2019, the SSPDF comprised the Ground Force, Air Force, Air Defense Forces and Presidential Guard. On May 16, 1983 105 Battalion launched a mutiny in Malul Chat Barak, Bor against the Sudanese army which later inspired a number of mutinies in the southern region including those at Ayad, Pochella and Pibur. These mutinies led to the creation of the SPLA later that year. At its inception John Garang was the SPLA's commander-in-chief. Kirubino Bal was appointed second-ranking commander, and William Nguyen Bani third. By June 1983, the majority of mutineers had moved to Ethiopia or were on their way there. The Ethiopian government's decision to support the emerging SPLA was a means of exacting revenge upon the Sudanese government for its support of Eritrean rebels. The SPLA struggled for a united and secular Sudanese state. Garang said the struggle of the South Sudanese was the same as that of marginalist groups in the north, such as the Nuba and Fur peoples. Until 1985, the SPLA directed its public denouncements of the Sudanese government specifically at Sudanese President, Ghavar Namiri. During the years that followed, SPLA propaganda denounced the Khartoum government as a family affair that played on sectarian tensions. The SPLA denounced the introduction of Sharia law in September 1983. The first fully fledged SPLA battalion graduated in 1984 in the village of Bilpam. The name Bilpam carried great symbolic importance for SPLA for years to come, as the epic entree of the uprising. After Bilpam, other SPLA training camps were established at Dima, Banga, and Paniado. In the mid-1980s the SPLA armed struggle blocked development projects of the Sudanese government, such as the Bentiu oil fields. The SPLA launched its first advance into Equatoria in 1985 and 1986. During this campaign, the SPLA were confronted by a number of pro-government militias. The conduct of SPLA forces was chaotic, with many atrocities against the civilian population. The SPLA drove out around 35,000 Ugandan refugees, who had settled in Equatoria since the early 1980s, back into Uganda. The SPLA had a complicated relationship with the Enyanyatu, a fellow southern Sudanese rebel group. The Enyanyatu forces blocked the expansion of the SPLA between 1984 and 1987, as Enyanyatu attacked SPLA recruits heading for Ethiopia. The Enyanyatu also attacked civilians believed to be SPLA supporters. The conflict between Enyanyatu and SPLA had a political dimension, as Enyanyatu sought to build an independent southern Sudanese state. The SPLA tried to win over the leaders of Enyanyatu. The Enyanyatu commander Gordon Conquil aligned with the SPLA in late 1987. Other sectors of the Enyanyatu followed his example over the ensuing years, marginalizing the remainder of the Enyanyatu who were allied with the Sudanese government. Another force that confronted SPLA were the Murahalayan militias in northern Bahr el Ghazal. Warfare between SPLA and Murahalayan began in 1987. By 1988 SPLA controlled most of the northern Bahr el Ghazal. Unlike the Enyanyatu, the Murahalayan had no political ambitions. In March 1986, the SPLA kidnapped a Norwegian aid worker of the Christian NGO Kirkens Nødhjelp, Norwegian Church Aid. Moorcroft writes that by this time, training, weapons, and discipline improved as the guerrillas won more and more victories. In November 1987 the guerrillas captured the small town of Kermak near the Ethiopian border. It was 450 miles from the capital, but the nearby dam provided most of Khartoum's electricity. The SPLA boycotted the 1986 Sudanese parliamentary election. In half of the constituencies of southern Sudan elections could not be held due to the SPLA boycott. On November 15, 1988, the SPLA entered into an alliance with the Democratic Unionist Party, DUP. The two groups agreed on the lifting of the state of emergency and abolition of Sharia law. The press release was made public through an announcement on Radio SPLA. After the DUP rejoined the government, a ceasefire with the SPLA was achieved. After the elections, negotiations between the SPLA and Sadiq al-Mahdi started, but were aborted after the SPLA shot down a civilian airplane, killing 60 people. All peace talks ended following the 1989 Sudanese coup d'état. In September 1989, the ruling Revolutionary Command Council for National Salvation, RCC, invited different sectors to a national dialogue conference, but the SPLA refused to attend. The SPLA launched a major offensive between 1989 and the fall of the Ethiopian Derg government in 1991. It captured various towns, such as Bor, Wayat, Maradai, Mundri, Yambio, Kaya, Kajo Kiji, Nemuel, Capo Eta, Torit, Akobo, and Nasir. By the middle of 1991, the SPLA controlled most parts of southern Sudan with the exception of the major garrison towns, Juba, Ye, Malakal, and Wau. Between January 21 and 29, 1990, SPLA shelled Juba. SPLA forces also moved into the Nuba Mountains and the southern parts of the Blue Nile state. In comparison with its 1985 to 1986 offensive in Equatoria, the conduct of SPLA was now more orderly. The downfall of the Derg government in Ethiopia in May 1991 proved to be a major setback. The Ethiopian government had provided the SPLA with military supplies, training facilities, and a safe haven for bases for 18 years. Soon after the change of government in Ethiopia, the SPLA accompanied hundreds of thousands of refugees back into Sudan. A split in the SPLA had simmered since late 1990, as Lam Akal and Riek Machar began to question Garang's leadership. Akal began secretly contacting SPLA officers to join his side, especially among the Nuer and Shilluk peoples. The situation deteriorated after the fall of the Derg. As the Derg regime crumbled, Akal published a document titled Why Garang Must Go Now. The split was made public on August 28, 1991, in what became known as the Nasir Declaration. The dissidents called for democratization of SPLA, a stop to human rights abuses, and an independent southern Sudan, Garang's goal of creating a united and secular Sudan. Konkal joined the rebellion. The SPLA Nasir was joined by the SPLA forces in Iad, Wayat, Adak, Abwang, Lur and Akobo. A period of chaos reigned inside the SPLA, as it was not clear which units sided with Garang and which with the SPLA Nasir. Garang issued a statement through the SPLA radio communications system, denouncing the coup. 9 out of 11, excluding himself, SPLA PMHC members sided with Garang. The mainstream SPLA led by Garang was based in Torit. The two SPLA factions fought each other, including attacks on civilians in their opponents' territory. As of 1992, the Sudanese government launched a major offensive against the SPLA, which was weakened by the split with the SPLA Nasir. The SPLA lost control of Torit, where the SPLA was headquartered, Bor, Ural, Pibor, Pochala and Capo Eta. The SPLA made 2 attacks on Juba in June, July 1992, during which they nearly captured the town. After the attacks, the Sudanese government forces committed harsh reprisals against the civilian population. Summary executions of suspected SPLA collaborators were carried out. On September 27, 1992, the Deputy Commander-in-Chief of the SPLA, William Nguyen, defected and took a section of fighters with him. The SPLA recaptured Bor on November 29, 1991. As of the mid-1990s, the majority of the population of southern Sudan lived in areas under the control of either the mainstream SPLA or the SPLA Nasir. In 2004, a year before the Comprehensive Peace Agreement, CPA, the Coalition to Stop Child Soldiers, estimated that there were between 2,500 and 5,000 children serving in the SPLA. 36. Following the signing of the CPA, an SPLA reorganization process began. This process was actively supported by funding from the United States. In 2005, Garang restructured the top leadership of the SPLA, with the Chief of General Staff, Lt. Gen. Oya Dengajak, and 4 Deputy Chiefs of General Staff, Maj. Gen. Salva Kiir, Administration, Maj. Gen. Bir Ajangaswad, Operations, Maj. Gen. James Hothmai, Logistics, and Maj. Gen. Obuto Mamermeet, Political and Moral Orientation. The initial organization of the SPLA, based on divisions, was assembled in mid-2005 but not actually put into practice in the field until 2006. It was based on 6 divisions, in Upper Nile State, 2nd Division, Equatorias, 3rd Division, Northern Bahr el Ghazal and Warrap States, 4th Division Unity State, the 5th Division in Lake State, the 6th Division, SPLA personnel in the Joint Integrated Units, and 4 independent brigades. The 4 independent brigades grouped SPLA forces in Bor, Corium, 104, and 105 battalions mainly, Southern Blue Nile, the Nuba Mountains, South Kordofan, and Raja, Western Bahr el Ghazal. Probably more important than the reorganization was the Juba Declaration, signed by Salva Kiir and General Paulino Matiep on January 8, 2006. Matiep commanded the South Sudan Defence Forces, SSDF, the largest and best-equipped militia, about 50,000 men, that remained beyond the SPLA's control. Paulino was appointed Deputy Commander-in-Chief, the second highest position. His subordinate generals became part of the SPLA without any reduction in rank, and about 50,000 SSDF were added to the SPLA payroll. The number of generals in the SPLA also rose as Kiir promoted hundreds of existing SPLA officers to match the arriving ex-SSDF generals. By 2011 and independence, the SPLA had 745 generals. At about the same time, the legislature voted to double infantrymen's base pay from the equivalent of $75 a month, the rate under Khartoum's control, to $150. The unification of the 2 largest armed groups in the region seriously weakened Khartoum's control of southern Sudan. In 2007 and 2008 the independent brigades in Blue Nile, Bor, and the Nuba Mountains became the 10th, 8th, and 9th divisions, respectively. The 9th and 10th divisions thus fell north of the January 1, 56 independence dividing line between North and South Sudan. The last independent brigade, in Raja, became part of the 5th division. In 2007, the SPLM/A established a Ministry of Defense. Gen. Dominic Dim Deng, an SPLA veteran, was chosen as the first minister for SPLA affairs and the first political officer of the SPLA. Dim died in a plane crash in 2008 alongside his wife, Josephina Pujanaro Akin, and other SPLA officers. He is buried alongside his wife at the SPLA headquarters in Bilfam, Juba. Deputy Chief of Staff, Logistics, James Hothmai replaced Oyadi Dengajak as Chief of General Staff in May 2009. In 2010, U.S. diplomats reported that Zamora made a point to discuss how the SPLA needed to be reorganized. He stated that the SPLA was top-heavy, carrying nearly 550 general officers and providing more than 200 security guards for each minister. The 2005 Comprehensive Peace Agreement stipulated that the SPLA in northern Sudan were to move south of the 1956 north-south boundary during the interim period, excepting those part of the Joint Integrated Units, composed of equal numbers from the SPLA and the Sudanese Armed Forces. Officially, this move did take place, in 2008, with the 10th Division relocating its headquarters to Gafaa, 5 kilometers south of the Blue Nile-Upper Nile border, and most of its troops to Al-Fujay, Yafta, and Marangia on the southern side. But more than 1,600 fighters remained north of the line. In early June 2011, following the lack of progress on popular consultations in southern Kordofan and Blue Nile, the SAF attempted to forcefully disarm Nuba SPLA soldiers, and fighting began in southern Kordofan. After the fighting began, former SPLA 9th and 10th Division fighters proclaimed themselves the Sudan People's Liberation Movement North, SPLAN, under Malik Agar as chairman and commander-in-chief. The government of southern Sudan named the SPLA General Headquarters outside Juba Bilpam. The headquarters staff was expanded after 2008 to match the 10-division structure. This expansion coincided with the completion of the General Headquarters at Bilpam, built by DynCorp with funds from the U.S. State Department's Africa Peacekeeping Program, AFRICAP. Work on a national security strategy began in late 2012. On December 15, 2013, fighting broke out in Juba between different factions of the armed forces in what the South Sudanese government described as a coup d'état. President Kiir announced that the attempt had been put down the next day, but fighting resumed December 16. Military spokesman Colonel Philip Agar said that some military installations had been attacked by armed soldiers but that the army is in full control of Juba. He added that an investigation was underway. Eventually the Sudan People's Liberation Movement split into two main factions, divided on the issue over leadership of the ruling party. The Sudan People's Liberation Movement, in government, SPLMIG, was led by President Kiir. It was the ruling faction that signed the Comprehensive Peace Agreement in January 2005. Kiir served as president of the Transitional Autonomous Region of South Sudan from its formation in 2005 after Garang's death until the country's independence in 2011. The SPLMIO faction formally withdrew from the SPLM ruling faction in 2013. The Sudan People's Liberation Movement, in opposition, SPLMIO, was formed in 2013 and is led by former South Sudan Vice President Riek Machar. The group is the major opponent to the SPLMIG faction in the Southern Sudanese Civil War. The coordination of the April-July 2015 attack by the SPLAIG in Unity State involving multiple divisions across multiple sectors indicates a high level of operational planning from Juba. The ferocity with which people were chased into the swamps to be killed was aimed at annihilating the SPLM/A in opposition's support, and led to systematic destruction of villages and towns. The Tiger faction New Forces, also called Tiger faction or the Tigers, split from the SPLA in late October 2015. A Shilluk militia, it aimed to reverse the division of South Sudan into 28, later 32, states in order to restore the territory of the Shilluk Kingdom to its 1956 borders. Led by Ioannis Okik, the TFNF started an insurgency against the SPLM government. In 2016, however, it also came into conflict with the SPLMIO rebels, leading to Okik's death and the group's destruction in January 2017. Over the course of the war, the SPLA has become dominated by Dinka, in particular Dinka from Greater Bahr el Ghazal. The panel of experts wrote in 2016, while other tribes are represented in SPLA, they are increasingly marginalized, rendering the multi-tribal structure of the army largely a facade that obscures the central role that Dinka now play in virtually all major theaters of the conflict. S/2016/963, 8. On May 16, 2017, Kiir announced a restructure of the army and change of name to the South Sudan Defence Forces, SSDF. A cessation of hostilities agreement was reached in December 2017, but never really took effect. In August 2017, Kiir announced that the new name for the army would be the South Sudan People's Defence Forces, SSPDF, by the need to represent the will of the people. He said that there was a need to reorganize and professionalize the army. According to Professor Joel Isabiryi, the change of name would shift the discourse from the era of liberation, which had now concluded, to one of national defense, which is ongoing, with the focus on defending the country against external aggression. The insertion of peoples into the name could be to avoid being dragged back into history when during the Second Sudanese Civil War, 1983 to 2005, a militia called South Sudan Defence Forces, SSDF, emerged and aligned with the government of Sudan. The negotiations stalled over disagreement among the parties about power sharing, future security arrangements and whether Riek Machar could return from exile to political life in South Sudan. In early May 2018, a two-day meeting of the parties to the revitalized agreement on the resolution of the conflict in South Sudan, RRCs, started in Addis Ababa. The parties were to take stock of the progress so far of the RRCs, the pending tasks, and debate the way forward. The army was officially renamed South Sudan People's Defence Forces in September 2018 by a Republican order read on the state-owned TV channel SSBC known as South Sudan Broadcasting Services, the national television in South Sudan. The renaming occurred 10 days before implementation of new security arrangements, which include the reunification of the National Army. President Kiir was also Commander-in-Chief of the Army. As of 2018, the Army was estimated to have 185,000 soldiers as well as an unknown number of personnel in the small South Sudan Air Force. According to the CIA World Factbook as of June 2020, under the September 2018 peace agreement, all armed groups in South Sudan were to assemble at designated sites where fighters could be either disarmed and demobilized, or integrated into unified military and police forces. The unified forces were then to be retrained and deployed prior to the formation of a national unity government. All fighters were ordered to these sites in July 2019, but as of April 2020 this process had not been completed. As of 2019, the SSPDF comprised the Ground Forces, Air Force, Air Defense Forces, and Presidential Guard with special attachment of Captain Boirul Makai, Batch 51 Sudan Military College graduate. In October 2019, more than 40 members of South Sudan People's Defence Forces, SSPDF, undertook a two-day training organized by the United Nations Mission in South Sudan, UNMISS, in Kwajok, Gogriel. UNMISS has been in the country since 2011, aiming to consolidate peace and achieve security to allow economic growth and political stability. They were deploying more than 19,000 personnel in the country as of September 2019. Thank you for watching this video.